been outlawed, that there are restrictions on abortion that protect the smallest and most vulnerable in that community.
Great. So now, okay, let's say a city becomes a sanctuary city. A couple of questions I have here now are, what if there's can this be done in a city where there's an abortion clinic, or is this basically for a city that already doesn't have an abortion clinic? And then what kind of, what's the enforcement for that? Because now with the chemical abortion, a woman could, leave her city, get, a medical abortion even mailed to her, and still abort her child in that sanctuary city. So how does all that happen?
Well, all of the ordinances are different. There's 51 communities across the United States that passed these ordinances. Majority of those are in Texas, but we also have some in Nebraska, in Iowa, in Louisiana, in Ohio, and we're working in New Mexico. And of course, the ordinances we have in Texas look differently than the ordinances in Iowa and Ohio, and of course, what we're putting forth in New Mexico. So these ordinances, some of them are enforced through the private enforcement mechanism that we've seen in the Texas Heartbeat Act. Some are enforced both with the private enforcement mechanism and with public enforcement of fines. And and some are just public enforcement fines without private enforcement. And so we have a little bit of everything, and we are very careful about making sure these are passed in the right way, with a letter from our attorney that says that he is willing to represent the city at no cost, city and taxpayers, for any litigation. And majority of these, of course, have been without abortion facilities in the community. But of course, Lubbock did have a Planned Parenthood, and the city of Lubbock passed one of these ordinances and shut down the abortion industry in that city. We're working on right now Bellevue, Nebraska, and Bellevue has an abortion facility. And so both communities with an active abortion facility and communities that currently don't have an abortion facility, we're seeing interest in both types of communities to pass these ordinances. And your question about the abortion pill, of course, the Biden administration has said that he wants to see abortion access in every zip code. And so these ordinances actually prohibit the mailing of the abortion pill into these communities. And so that's something that we want to do everything that we can to protect innocent life.
Okay. Let's go back to Lubbock, Texas for a minute, okay? Because Lubbock, Texas had a Planned Parenthood, and you said they were still able to pass the ordinance. But then what happened to the Planned Parenthood in Lubbock? Did it close? And did they just close and leave town? What was the follow-up to actually get them to leave Lubbock?
So when the ordinance was passed, it ended up being passed in a citywide election. Usually these are passed through just mayor and city council, but this one was an election, and it was 62 to 38% in Lubbock's favor. It was passed May 1st of 2021. And of course, with any type of election, there has to be a canvassing of the votes. And so the votes were canvassed, and the ordinance was going to go in effect June 1st. Now, June 1st, right before June 1st, Planned Parenthood decided to sue the city of Lubbock, and we ended up 2 weeks later, we won. And so June 1st, the ordinance went into effect. Planned Parenthood stopped performing abortions, and that day we got the ruling from the court that the city of Lubbock won, that Planned Parenthood lost the lawsuit. And so they issued a statement on their page saying that because of the ordinance, they would no longer perform abortions. Now, that Planned Parenthood is still doing other services, but of course, since June 1, they have not done any abortions. It's good to note too that this was before Senate Bill 8, the Texas Heartbeat Act, went into effect. And so that went into effect September 1, but no abortions, period, happened in Lubbock at this Planned Parenthood facility since that June 1 date.
Wow. Now, what is, though, the kind of like watching to make sure they don't do abortions, or watching to make sure they don't give the medical abortion to a woman coming there? Is there any kind of, I don't know, follow-up, watchdog, something to make? Because, I don't trust Planned Parenthood that they wouldn't give the abortion pill out. Is there some sort of something in place that can follow up to make sure this continues to happen?
Well, we believe that the abortion industry in Lubbock, the former abortion industry in Lubbock, the remnants of it, that they are not doing any abortions. Because if they did, then they're risking lawsuits being filed against them by citizens, plus the city of Lubbock enforcing penalties as well, since Roe v. Wade is now overturned. And so we have seen great success with this method. And we believe that we do occasionally, people call into that Planned Parenthood. They will see if they are accepting appointments. We are paying very close attention. But so far, we're seeing that this abortion industry is complying. And all across Texas, they seem to be complying with the laws that have been passed, the Texas Heartbeat Act, the Texas Trigger Ban, and the sanctuary city ordinances and the pre-Roe statutes. So all of these things, we're seeing whole women's health and other abortion industries leave Texas. We love seeing those signs on those buildings that say that the abortion industry is leaving town.
Yeah. Okay. So now in very, very deep blue states like California, who have abortion till birth, has there been any interest in trying to make a sanctuary city in a state like California?
Absolutely. In fact, so we have gotten so many requests from cities like Visalia, California. And there's a lot of interest in cities like that. And then also we've been spending a whole lot of time in places like New Mexico. Just this week, I've been to 2 city commission meetings where there was well over 100 people from the community that were very passionate about wanting to see their city commissioners outlaw abortion. There's a myth out there that people just think that New Mexico is it's a liberal state and everyone in it is liberal. That's just not true. These counties, Curry County is 69% Trump vote in the last election. Look at where Hobbs, New Mexico is. That's in Lee County, 79% Trump vote in the last election. These are very conservative areas, and we're seeing massive turnouts for the pro-life community. There was not one person at the last meeting that I was at in Clovis, New Mexico, before the city commission, not one person that was opposed to the ordinance. Everyone was saying not just to outlaw abortion, but let's speed up this process. Let's let Clovis, New Mexico be a beacon for all of New Mexicans to stand up and fight for the rights of life to the unborn.
And then I had heard that in Temecula, California, they wanted to start this idea happening, but then the state attorney general kind of stepped in and discouraged them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that case?
So there's a difference in, a lot of people are using the term sanctuary city for the unborn, but there's a difference between what I'm doing with ordinances, which are laws, and when people are trying to pass resolutions. A resolution is a statement. It has no legal force to it. But an ordinance is a law, so there's consequences if someone violates that ordinance. In Temecula, they were looking at a resolution. And even in looking at a resolution, of course, they got pushed back from the state of California. And that's the thing, that no matter what we do, if we're in a very liberal state, and even if we're not in a liberal state, there's always going to be opposition. And I am reminded of a story from early on. It was the 13th city that had outlawed abortion in our whole list of cities. And that was Whiteface, Texas. Now, at that time, 12 cities had outlawed abortion, but 7 of them had got sued by the ACLU. And so in that lawsuit, there was this period, it was going to take some time. It was a 3-month period. But during that time, I got a call from the mayor of Whiteface, Texas. Her name was Judy Devers. And Judy said that she'd been kept up at night. And she said, Mark, I feel like we need to pass an ordinance outlawing abortion. What would God do if we didn't pass this ordinance? And I said, Mayor Devers, do you realize that 7 cities got sued by the ACLU? And she said, I realize that, Mark, but like I said, we need an ordinance to outlaw abortion in Whiteface, Texas. I said, Mayor Devers, are you saying you fear God more than the ACLU? And she said, Mark, that's exactly what I'm saying. And we saw Whiteface, Texas outlaw abortion. And that's the kind of attitude people need. People need to fear God more than they fear their governor, whether it's Governor Grisham in New Mexico or Governor Newsom in California, that we need to make sure that we're doing what's right. Amos 5:15 says to hate evil, love good, and establish justice within the city gates. And that's what we got to do. We got to obey Scripture. We got to stand up and fight. We can't just let these people in positions of power bulldoze over the people.
Wow. And then, Mark, I heard about Melanie Staniford over in Nebraska. She was fired from her job at a news station because she took a sanctuary city for the unborn petition to her church, and her job fired her for doing that. Can you give us a little update about what's happening with Melanie?
Absolutely. So Melanie has reached out to the Thomas More Society, and they're in discussions right now about the path forward. This is something that shouldn't happen. The laws in the state of Nebraska are very clear that it is a felony for an employer to fire someone for a political action such as the circulation of a petition. And the fact that she was fired for circulating a petition in her church, this is extremely concerning. And I wish I could say that this is the first time something like this has happened, but the reality is I was just talking to a mayor who in the past, he was fired from his job because of him putting a sanctuary city ordinance on the agenda. And this was a secular job that he was working in addition to being mayor. But apparently some people in power in his company didn't like that. And so, this is something that we need to do everything we can to stand up for our rights. And people firing us because of our pro-life beliefs, it just shouldn't happen. And we should do everything we can to push back and fight against those who are treating pro-lifers unjustly.
Wow. So Mark, I think a lot of people listening right now might say, hey, this sounds like a great idea. How could someone who says, I want to do this in my city, can you give us a little recipe of where they could go for the information, and what are those little steps that they're going to have to take to just make this begin to happen in their city?
Absolutely. So I would encourage, no matter where someone is at, whether they're in Texas, we still need to pass things in Texas. We're going to constantly be finding more things that we can do, more loopholes that we can close, more ways that we can restrict abortion access. And so whether someone's in Texas or New Mexico or California or Kansas, the process is all the same. We encourage them to go to the website at sanctuarycitiesfortheunborn.com. And on that website, we encourage them to sign the online petition. And when they sign the online petition, there's basic questions there about their name, where they live. We also put the city that they work in and the city where they go to church in. We want that information because we're casting a net. We're seeing if there may be a lot of interest in a nearby community where they go to church at. And so we want to make sure that we look at that community as well. And we tell people once they sign the petition to share the petition, share it at church, share it with their friends, their family members, their neighbors, just share it with everyone. The more interest we have in a community, the easier it is to go forward, because we like to plan rallies. We like to find out, where the meeting place is at. Is it best to meet in a church? Is it best to meet in a library? Where do we need to have these meetings at? And we just go from there. Now, once there's a lot of interest in the community and we move forward in that area, that's when we draft the ordinance. We have draft the attorney letters that say that our attorney will represent the city at no cost to the taxpayers if they pass it. And then, of course, if it is challenged, then, there's a safe passage for that the city is not, caught in a situation where they don't know what to do, but that they have competent legal counsel that has been before the Supreme Court of the United States before and is willing to take it that far if need be.
So when they go to that website, sanctuarycitiesfortheunborn.com, there's, like you said, a petition. But then how long does it take from the minute they sign that petition? What do they get? Do they get, like you said with Melanie, she got fired for handing out the petition in her church. So is that what they can do? They can download the petition. They can bring it to other people to sign. And about how many people do you think you need in a community to sign such a thing before you guys will engage with that community and kind of help push it along?
Well, every place is different. And in Nebraska, some of the direction we went there was a different type of petition. So the type of petition that Melanie was circulating in her church was actually a petition that was authorized by the state of Nebraska through the citizen initiative process. And so there's something called the Nebraska Municipal Initiative and Referendum Act. And so the petition that Melanie was circulating in her church was not only approved by the city clerk of Curtis, Nebraska to circulate, but it was also approved by the state of Nebraska, which actually opens the door for a lot of more legal conundrums for the news station that fired her. Now, the petition that we have on our website is it's a very different type of petition. It's a more like an interest form. And so, but we call it a petition, and we encourage that link to be circulated. For those who are older and not used to computers, we do want to reach those communities. So we have where they can download, there's a PDF where they can download that petition and they could get signatures. But on those, it's imperative that those get turned back into Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn. And so a lot of times people will email those into us, and we're very careful about moving forward. Every community is different. For a city that is over 100,000, obviously we're going to need a whole lot more signatures that represent the community than a community that is about 300 people. And sometimes it's a matter of who we have that is interested in the community. If we have a mayor reach out to us or a city council member reach out to us, the process tends to go a whole lot faster. So it just depends. I've seen cities do this in 3 days, and I've seen cities take over 3 years to pass an ordinance. And so we're just very careful about how we go forward, making sure that everyone knows and that it's what's going on, and that this is going to have a good shot at passage.
Right. What has been, would you say, in the cities, that you've already accomplished this, 50 some odd, I think you said, what was the cooperation in the churches for the most part? Did you get many of the churches to kind of get on board right away and help fuel the engine of this to get it moving?
Absolutely. In fact, in the city of Lubbock, which Lubbock is about 264,000 people. It's the 80th largest city in America, the 11th largest in Texas. That community, the churches really paved the way. The churches were putting massive signs outside of their buildings. The churches were collecting signatures inside of their church buildings on Sunday mornings. The churches were really engaged. And in fact, so much so that when Planned Parenthood talked about why they lost the election, even though they spent 3 times more than what we spent, their answer is that they said that we had these large churches, and they spoke of them as well-oiled machines, and they were. The church was engaged, the pastors were leading, and it made all the difference in the world. We got the signatures we needed, which for Lubbock was a city initiative process. So it's different than the standard petition that we use on the website. But we ended up getting over 7,000 signatures, which was well over what we needed. Now, the flip side is that when large churches oppose us, and yes, it happens, that creates difficulty. And so we, in Abilene, Texas, one of the largest churches in Abilene, Texas, the pastor and one of their elders, who is a city council member in Abilene, they were against the Texas Heartbeat Act's private enforcement mechanism and against that in the sanctuary city ordinances. And so they opposed us, and they got other churches to oppose us. And so it's difficult going up against sometimes other churches who are standing in the way of initiatives being accomplished. But we did collect enough signatures for Abilene. We had to collect far more signatures, even though Abilene is a smaller city than Lubbock. But we had to collect over 10,000 signatures in order to get the right number of verified signatures. And so it was a lot of work, wow. But we got it done.
That's great. And so about how many cities right now would you say are in the works?
So we've got 10 cities that's going to be on the ballot this November. And wow. Those cities are the cities of Abilene and Athens and Plainview and San Angelo in Texas. And so those ordinances, some people are asking, well, why are you passing ordinances in Texas? Isn't abortion outlawed completely in Texas? The answer is yes. But these ordinances would actually prohibit abortions being performed on residents of these cities, regardless of where the abortion takes place, whether it takes place in New Mexico or Washington, D.C., that we are doing everything we can to protect the residents of these communities. Then in Nebraska, we've got ordinances on the ballot in the villages of Arnold, in Brady, in Hershey, in Wallace, and in Paxton, and then also in the city of Curtis in Nebraska. And so we're hopeful those will pass.
Mark, you are doing a fantastic job. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And I know there's many people out there right now that are going to get on board. So thank you for being part of our program today.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Okay. God bless. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope you were inspired now. Go to sanctuarycitiesfortheunborn.com. Go there today. Look at the information, and maybe you could be a sanctuary city too. Because remember, there are some abortions only you can stop, and some lives only you can save. Join us again next time. This is Janet Marana, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Thank you, and God bless.